Welcome, folks. Be another 2 minutes or so before we get started. All right, welcome, folks. We are going to get started. Let's see if we can get this focused up here. And there we go. Since I'm upside down, get that fixed. All right. So welcome everybody to the 30th day of remote learning. This is our final lesson for the semester. And on Friday at 1 p.m., I've been asked if, following up on the intro I did the other day where I showed my computer setup, I mentioned that I play Hearthstone and the very occasional game of League of Legends. And so I was asked if for an end of year party, I'd be willing to stream myself playing some of these games. So Friday at 1 p.m., I'll be doing that. Fair warning, I have been playing League of Legends for 3 weeks now, maybe, and I'm terrible at it. So you can enjoy that in the stream. Hearthstone, I've been playing for many years and I have some skill. So hopefully you'll be able to enjoy a little bit of that in terms of the quality of play, rather just the quality of the humor. But that is the plan for 1 p.m. on Friday. I do ask one thing. Obviously, if anybody is acting in an inappropriate way in the chat, we'll need to shut down the stream. And so I have a very high level of confidence that the students from our classes won't do that. But please don't share the stream information with students outside of our classes. This is something that is really just for the students from our classes, students who know each other, and we have that built relationship. And I have a strong expectation that all of you will act appropriately and that we'll be able to enjoy a good time together. So please keep that within our class. I'll put the link up in the Google Classroom just before 1 p.m. as usual. All right. So today, our final actually, one other thing I wanted to talk about, marks. So a bit later this afternoon, I will put a post up in the classroom with marks for end of year stuff. I cannot emphasize enough, the number you will see there does not mean anything. And I know that sounds like a really weird thing to say, because in a normal semester, teachers work very hard to make sure that marks accurately mean an indication of how much of the course students have mastered. That is not the case this semester. And it's really important for you to understand that the marks this semester are totally different in their meaning than the marks in a regular semester. Teachers made a very strong request across the province. Teachers made a very strong request this semester that we not be required to put a mark on the report card, and that instead we be able to just say so-and-so has the credit. But we were told, no, you have to put a mark. For some of you, I have most of the work that you've done during remote learning. For some of you, I have part of that work. For some of you, I have none of that work. And I understand fully that some of you are in situations for a wide variety of reasons where you're not able to do that work, or you did it, but you weren't able to upload it. And that is totally fine with me. So I'm not in any way suggesting that it's a problem that some people haven't been able to do the work. That is a very reasonable outcome in this situation. But because I don't have full work, I can't accurately assess what you know. So if you've done all the work and it's perfect, normally that's 100%. But if I don't see the work, I don't have any way to know where you're at. Even for those of you who I do have full work on, it's very difficult for me to assess your learning. You might say, well, but Mr. Island, like, you can see the work that I did. I can. The problem is that homework is meant for you to learn things. And so since you are in the learning process, if there's something you don't understand, you should look back at your notes, or you should go back to the video lesson. If you still can't figure it out, you should ask for help from me, from a family member who's already done the course or who knows math well, or check it out online, search it up and see what you can find. You are meant to go and find the resources that you need to help you learn the material. And so somebody may have perfectly completed homework, that is perfectly completed because they had a lot of help. And perhaps by the end of that, they had an excellent top notch understanding of the skills. Or perhaps by the end of that, they were just starting to get it. And they're like, oh, thank you so much to, the brother or sister who helped them. I think I'm starting to get it now. But in both cases, the homework looks perfect. So uh, I can't use that as an assessment and say, well, it's homework. You should have been doing it in a way that was just you. That's not true. It's homework. You should have been doing it, getting help when you needed it. That's the whole reason that we do that work. So it just means that because of how we set it up and its purpose, homework is not a good way to assess people's knowledge. It's a good way to help them learn, which is a different thing. So for these reasons, the mark that you see on your report card is not an accurate reflection of your mastery of the course topics. And it's really important to understand that. And I've had quite a few students email me over the last few days saying that they're worried about their mark. Is there something they can do to raise their mark and so on? The mark really, really doesn't matter. And I do understand, and I've mentioned this before, that many parents are understandably concerned about marks. And during a normal semester, that makes a lot of sense. But this semester, because of the situation and the impossibility of getting an accurate mark, it doesn't make sense. And so if you have parents who are concerned, who are telling you, make sure you get a good mark here, or who have high expectations, please let me know. I'm very happy to give them a call. I've already done this for one student. Very happy to give them a call and just say, look, I fully support you wanting your child to do really well in courses, but this semester marks are not accurate and you should not worry about how they've done. So the marks that I will be posting were arrived at basically in the following way. I looked at your mark from March 13th, which is when classes ended. I did a mathematical calculation to bump it up a bunch. And then any that were still below, I think 65%, I bumped them up to 65, as long as a student was either close to 50% or has done any work during the remote learning time. So as you can see, this is not a process that's going to lead to an accurate mark, right? Some people had a rough time on those first two tests and would have done much better through the rest of the semester and never got a chance to show that. Their mark is not going to be accurate. It's going to be too low. Some people did really well in those first two tests because they'd learned that stuff in grade 8. And then, they might have struggled with some of the harder concepts and had their mark go down. Well, their mark has not gone down. It's actually gone up quite a bit. So there's no accuracy to these numbers. And I just really want to stress that. Please, if you look at your mark and you're like, oh my gosh, 72, I really wanted an 80 in this course. 72 and 80 are no different for these purposes. I'm forced to put a number there. I did a simple calculation. It threw out a number. I gave that number. That number is not accurate. So if you're worried about it, please don't be. If your parents are worried about it, let me know, and I'm happy to talk to them and explain this situation to them. So it is very reasonable for you to be worried about whether you are prepared for grade 10 math. And as I've said a number of times, my goal throughout this online learning process was to get you as well prepared as we can for grade 10. So in grade 10 math next year, teachers are going to be going back and doing a lot more review from grade 9 than they normally would, because they understand that many of you have been in situations where you haven't had a really good chance to learn the material. And so, you don't need to be perfectly prepared for grade 10 or even as well prepared as you normally would be for grade 10 in order to be successful. We will be doing things next year to help all of our students to make up for the gaps that we know they're going to have coming out of this semester. But the better prepared you are, obviously, the easier grade 10 will be. And so my goal is to help you to get as far as you can. If you have had lots of time and you felt very comfortable and in good mental health through this isolation, and you've been able to do lots of stuff, that's great. And I want to help you to do even more and get an even fuller understanding. If you found this time really difficult, you maybe, like me, have had a family member who's had COVID-19, or you've had other challenges, and I know that many of you have, I just want to help you get a little bit farther along than you would have without my help. So whatever I can do to make that grade 10 course just a little bit easier for you, that's my goal. And so that's why through these review sessions, we've been focused on the skills that are most important for grade 10. And the best way for you to tell whether you're well prepared for grade 10 is to go through and try these review skills. They're all up on Khan Academy. It just asks you a question, you answer it, and it tells you whether you got it right. So you get immediate feedback as to whether you're correctly doing these questions. If there's a skill or more than one skill that you're having difficulty with, you're answering it and Khan Academy is telling you it's wrong, or you're not sure how to go about answering it, please send me an email. Many students have already done this through the process, and I've got back to them with some help. In some cases, it's been helpful. In other cases, they've said, I still don't understand. And we've had a longer conversation and got them to the point where they understand. In some cases, I've written back and then they said, actually, I figured it out myself. Great. Any of those is wonderful. But I really do want to help you to master any skills from that list that you're missing. And that is the best way to tell whether you're prepared for grade 10. It is a much better way than your mark. So please don't be concerned about marks, but please do take the time to master as many of those review skills as you can, and to let me know about any that you're struggling with so that I can help you with them. Okay, so that's a lot of intro talking. We've got a few people watching along. So let's get moving into our review skills for today. Okay. So we have 4 skills today. Several of them are going to be on graph paper. And let me just see if I can turn this around. There we go. Yeah, okay. Stream day 30. All right. So the first one is simply horizontal and vertical lines. And we'll do this on some grid paper here. So for horizontal and vertical lines, make sure that's in view, horizontal and vertical lines. So we start with horizontal lines. They are the easier of the two to deal with because they can be handled in our usual y equals mx plus b form. So if we have a little xy axis here, set this up. And we have a horizontal line. Let's say, pick this one right here. And we graph that. All right. So if we want to find the equation of this line, we'll pick 2 points on the line, maybe that one and that one. And you notice I'm doing my points are being chosen where the grid lines cross. And that's because then I'm going to get whole numbers for the coordinates. So the coordinates for this one, 1, 2, 3. So the x coordinate is 1, 1, 2, 3. The y coordinate is 2. And for this point here, the x coordinate is 3. And the y coordinate is 2. So those are 2 points on my line. You can pick any 2 points you want, but these ones are the ones that I've picked. So now if we calculate the slope, that's the change in y, so final minus initial, divided by the change in x, final minus initial. And in this case, we'll call this our initial point, our final point, x, y, x, and y. So y final, y from the final point is 2 minus y initial. Y from the initial point is also 2, divided by x from the final point, which was 3, and minus x from the initial point, which is 1. And that gives us 0 divided by 2, or just plain 0. So we know that our slope is 0. we can look on the graph and see that the y-intercept here is right at 2. So we know the y-intercept is 2. And then when we do y equals mx plus b, we're going to get y equals m. We know that's 0. X plus b, we know that's 2. And so we get the equation is y equals 0x plus 2. But it's actually a tiny bit more complicated than that, or really less complicated than that, because 0 times x is 0, and 0 plus 2 is 2. So this is actually just 2. So the equation of this line is simply y equals 2. Any horizontal line, because it doesn't go up or down, is going to have a slope of 0. Remember, positive slopes mean the line's going up to the right. Negative slopes means the line is going down to the right. Horizontal line, which is in between those two, is going to have a slope of 0. So all horizontal lines have slopes of 0. And the other thing I want to talk about is that we can take this y equals 0x plus 2 form, change it to y equals 2. There's another way to think about what it means when we say the equation is y equals 2. We can think of it as meaning that every point on this line has a y value of 2, and there's no x in this equation because the x value doesn't matter. If you pick an x value of 72 and a y value of 2, you're going to be out on this line. You go way out along this x-axis to 72, and then you go up to 2, and you'll be on the continuation of this line. If you pick an x value of negative 3 billion, you'll be going down negative 3 billion that way. As long as your y value is 2, you will still be on this line. So every point with a y value of 2 is part of this line. And that's a good way to think about what the equation y equals 2 means. Okay. So that is for horizontal lines. For vertical lines, we have a slightly trickier situation, although the end result is very similar. All right. So if we have a vertical line straight up and down here, let's do maybe this one. And we want to look at the equation of this line. Well, if we were to calculate the slope by picking 2 points, and I won't go back through and do this again, but hopefully you can remember it from the earlier lesson, we're going to get something divided by 0. And you can't divide by 0. It's not a number. There's no answer. And if you try it on your calculator, you'll get error. And so we say that for vertical lines, the slope just doesn't exist. There's no number that is equal to the slope, not even 0, right? 0 is good for horizontal lines, but for vertical lines, there's no number at all, not even 0, that will work and give us the slope. And if you try to calculate it, you'll have to divide by 0, and that just doesn't give you a number. It gives you an error. So we can't do a y equals mx plus b equation for this line because we have no m value. We can't calculate a slope. In fact, it's even worse than that because we also can't calculate a y-intercept. And that makes sense because this line never crosses the y-axis. So there's no y-intercept because the y-intercept would be where the line crosses the y-axis, but it doesn't cross the y-axis. So this line, vertical lines are just weird for the y equals mx plus b form. They really, really don't work that way. So what can we do to write an equation for this line? Well, we can take a hint from this y equals 2 idea. Remember we said y equals 2 means every point on this line has a y value of 2, And there's no x in here because the x value doesn't matter. For every x value, the y coordinate is always 2. If your x value is 1, the y coordinate's 2. If your x value is 3, the y coordinate's 2. If your x value is negative pi, the y coordinate's 2. The y coordinate's just always 2, so y equals 2. Well, vertical lines are kind of the same thing, except instead of the y coordinate always being the same, it's the x coordinate that's always the same. So in this case, our x coordinate is -1, and if I look at this point up here, it has an x coordinate of -1 and a y coordinate of 3. If I look at this point here, it has an x coordinate of -1 and a y coordinate of 2. If I look at this point down here, it has an x coordinate of -1 and a y coordinate of -2. Any point that I choose on this line is going to have an x coordinate of -1. And every point with an x coordinate of -1 is on this line, right? Because it has to be above or below, directly above or directly below the -1 on the x-axis, and that is this line. So the easy way, and really the only way to write an equation for this line is to use x equals -1 or some rearrangement of that, but basically x equals -1. So we can use this y equals 2 idea to get this x equals -1 idea, and therefore be able to write this line as an equation without needing y equals mx plus b. All right, give me a 1 in chat if that's making sense, and if you have questions, now is a great time to ask them. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so if you are looking at a line, all you need to do to figure out the equation is if it's horizontal, pick any, or sorry, if it's vertical, pick any point, look at the x coordinate, and just write x equals that number. If it's horizontal, pick any point, look at the y coordinate, and then write y equals that number for a horizontal line. Okay. Second skill on there is systems of equations with graphing. So systems of equations, I'm going to tear this off and move it up so you can see a little better. Cross, and it'll get more complicated than that in grade 12, but for now, that's by far the best way to think about it. Where do two lines cross each other? So if I have, for example, make my grid a little bit larger this time. X, Y, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -1, -2, -3, -1, -2, -3. So let's say I have the line y equals 2x plus 5. And I also have the line y equals 1/2 x plus 2, let's say. I think that'll work out reasonably well. Yeah, okay. And I want to know, where do these two lines cross? Or another way to ask that is, so also known as, what is the point of intersection? And it's often abbreviated POI. So you'll see that a lot of these lines. Well, in grade 10, you'll develop two different methods for doing this with an algebraic calculation, but we're going to do it just by drawing the graph of these two lines and seeing where they cross. So we have y equals 2x plus 5. So that means my y-intercept is 5. And I'm going to go up 2, and 2 is like 2 over 1. So it'll be up 2 over 1 for my slope. My rise is 2, my run is 1. And that means if I work backwards from here, it's going to be like down 2 over 1 in the other direction to get a nice straight line. Down 2 over 1 in the other direction, down 2 over 1 in the other direction. Okay, so when I'm working backwards, I'm going to be going down 2. When I'm working forwards, I'm going up 2. So that gets me a nice straight line. And there we go. There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to draw the second line, and I'm going to use some green for that one. So this one here is in green, whereas this one here is in red. Okay. So for this one, we can see we have a y-intercept of 2 right there. And my slope is 1/2. So I'm going to go up 1 over by 2, up 1 over by 2, up 1 over by 2. And I've got a few points, and I can go ahead and graph this. Whoop, there we go. All right. And so now the question was, where do these two lines cross, or what is their point of intersection? Well, we can see it right here on the graph. The two lines cross at, so the point of intersection is -2 is my x value, and 1 is my y value. Ooh, and you can't see that. Let me push it up. There we go. So they're crossing right there at -2, 1. And so the point of intersection, or the point where they cross, is -2, 1. And so that's all you need to do right now for systems of equations. Take the two lines, graph them both, and look at where they cross. And those coordinates are your solution to the system, also known as the place where the lines cross, also known as the point of intersection. All right. So let me know in chat what questions you have. And if you're feeling comfortable with that and ready to move on, just give me a 1 in the chat. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, Adam. All right. So the next skill that we're looking at, the last two skills here, are about three-dimensional shapes. And I'm actually going to do them both together at once. So one of them is decomposing figures to find volumes. That's a fancy way of saying that you have a shape that's made up of more than one shape put together. And we need to find the volume. And the other one is volume and surface area of cylinders, spheres, and cones. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to do one example of a composite shape that includes a cylinder and a cone together, so that you can see both of these skills in action all at once. So we'll call this volumes. Make sure that I'm on the screen here. There we go. Okay. And so the shape we're going to look at is made up with a cone on top of a cylinder. All right. There we go. So let's add some dimensions here. 20 centimeters tall. We will add a diameter of, let's say, 10 centimeters. And for the cone, let's add a height of 7 centimeters. So if we want to find the volume of this, the first thing you should do is make sure that you know the volume formulas for cone and cylinder. And I just realizing that I did not give you the formula sheet. I'm going to add that into the Google Classroom. You can always use the EQAO formula sheet for doing work in this course. I realize always now just means this is your very last thing to do, but it is available to us. And so I've just added it in to the classroom there. If in one moment, if now you hit reload, you should see a link to it. So you're welcome to use that. You might have to scroll down to the second page. That's where the 3D shapes are. So if we want to find the volume of this all together, we have the volume total equals the volume of the cone plus the volume of the cylinder. And you might remember back in class that I was advising you always write out your plan when you're having a composite shape. So if I want to find the volume of this whole shape, how do I need to proceed? I'm going to need to find the volume of the cone and add it to the volume of the cylinder. So now I've written that plan. Volume of cone plus volume of cylinder. That's how I'm going to get this. And for some of the more complicated shapes we were looking at, maybe you had to, take a volume of a sphere and cut it in half or do some things like that. You want all of that in your plan so that it's as easy as possible to then go and calculate it. Okay, so volume of a cylinder. Well, if I look up the formula in the formula sheet, I see that I get pi r squared h. So pi times r squared times h. That's going to give me the cylinder. Oh, and so I'm actually backwards here. So for cone, which is the first one, it's pi r squared h over 3. And this h is height of the cone. And I'm going to say that because the radius for both the cone and the cylinder is going to be the same here, but the heights are different, right? The height of the cylinder is 20 centimeters. The height of the cone is only 7 centimeters. So we need to be careful to note that the heights of both of them are different and not get mistaken and put them both as the same height. So the cylinder volume, pi r squared h, and this height is the height for the cylinder. Okay, so then I just need to sub in. So pi, the radius, well, here my diameter is 10 centimeters. My radius is going to be diameter divided by 2. So that's 10 centimeters divided by 2. So that is 5 centimeters. So when I go here and I have r is going to be 5. I need to square it. And then height of the cone, which is 7. All of that gets divided by 3 plus pi times the radius squared, and it's the same radius, so I can reuse 5, times the height of the cylinder, which is 20. And then I can calculate. So 5 squared is 25. 25 times 7 is 175. And I'm going to leave dividing by 3 now because it doesn't give a nice whole number. And, not equals, but plus. 5 squared is 25. 25 times 20 is 500. So this is going to be pi times 500. And then we can now either put these together into a single fraction. I said 500, I wrote 5,000. So if I multiply by 3 over 3, put this over 1, then I can get this all down into one fraction. So 3 times 500 is 1,500, plus 175 is 1,675. Both of these fractions have 3 as a denominator, and pi is in common. So if I'm writing this in exact form, that's what I'd get. You can also, obviously, at any point here, go directly to decimals. Let me grab my calculator. and do that. So if I have pi times 175 divided by 3 plus pi times 500, I get 100 or 1,754.05. And I'm going to leave that out. I guess I could put it in. And I guess it's 0.06 if I round. And these are centimeters and it's volume. So we're talking centimeters cubed. And if I had calculated it from here instead of from here, I should get the same answer. So 1675 times pi divided by 3. Yep. And I get exactly the same thing. So that's good news. Okay. So this gives you an example of how to use cylinder and cone volumes. For sphere, same idea, but obviously you'll need to use the formula for a sphere. And it gives you an idea of how to take a composite shape, break it down into a plan for finding the volume of the whole thing. So please let me know in chat what your questions are, or if you're feeling comfortable with that and ready to move on, just give me a 1 in chat. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Blake. All right. So that should pretty much cover it. We have done almost all of the major topics of the course. I was looking at the list of all the things we normally do in grade 9 math. There are some interesting side pieces that we haven't covered, but all of the major things that go into grade 10, there's really only one we haven't talked about, which is graphing stories. And you'll do a lot of that in grade 10 and grade 11. So if we miss it in grade 9, you are still going to be in good shape. So I'm really happy that we've been able to get through so much. Again, if you would like me to talk to your parents about why they shouldn't be concerned about your mark this semester, send me an email. I'm very happy to make that call and let them know. And that is it for our lesson for today. So thanks a lot, folks. Hope to see you on Friday for our end of year party. I will put the link to the Twitch stream up very shortly before our regular 1 p.m. time once I get that stream up and running. Have a good rest of your day, folks. Take care.